Kathy Camp talking about student services.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. How are you? I was just sharing with Dr. Dukes. I'd like to, before I begin the presentation, ask one thing. How many of you are new to Prince George's Community College? So then I can figure out what we need to hit on the presentation. Well, welcome. Great. So the other thing is I wanted to correct a new thing that's happened this fall. So the gentleman from Alaska can in fact register on Monday. So it was a decision that was made, not mine, but in concert with Dr. Rayleigh, that we've got 1 day ad drop period that didn't used to happen. And that was, so the first day of the class, of that session, they can add drop, and that allowed access so that advisors could help them because it became such a backlog. If any of you see your chair's offices, or if you saw admissions and records and Gina Robinson, when there's no more access anymore, it's a backlog and a problem. So Monday we're going to have less problems so that you know. I believe Andrea Wheeler sent out something, and that's what she was speaking of, about that your class roster is final on the second day of class. Okay?
So I'll tweet Monday, you better be here.
So anyway, we will have to live through this and see if that was beneficial or not. But sometimes you have to try things, okay? So we're going to walk through this one in fall and see how that goes, and appreciate your patience. All right, on to the regularly scheduled program. Yes, if you'll go to the next slide. I'm here, Kathy Camp, Interim Vice President for Student Affairs, and my colleague, Kyra Milbourne-Holley. She is the Program Coordinator of Student Conduct and Community Standards. So we're going to be tag teaming this presentation. I want you to know some things about Student Affairs if you don't know who is what and what this Student Affairs umbrella covers. As Dr. Duke says, you can reach out to those folks directly, or you can always reach out to me. We want to know what the struggles are that students are having that you know from the classroom, because we do want to help. We find out because they tell us certain things, but in the classroom they're going to share other things with you. And we have so many wonderful folks and great resources and services. There's probably nothing that we cannot refer, at least, to a place that could help them, or help them ourselves, okay? So enrollment services, athletics, student success and engagement, student academic planning and career readiness, and financial aid. Under there you will see, and I'm blocking it, under there you will see the things that fall under their purview. So the standard sorts of enrollment services. Student success and engagement involves all the supports, special populations, so the diverse male student initiatives that you may have heard about, women of wisdom programs. So there's lots of ways for us to plug students into things that provide extra supports. And even those non-traditional students, there are WOW events, Women of Wisdom events in the evening. We do try to do programming for those students in the evening as well. And then in the Vice President's office, under the Director, is where conduct and community standards, special scholarships such as the Promise Scholarship, and the Student Employment Program are within the Office of the Vice President, okay? Next slide, Kyra. We're going to begin with the Student Code of Conduct, and I'll let Kyra speak more to that. But what I did want you to know is it's in the Student Handbook, which I hope you have one. It is a codified policy, meaning the Board of Trustees approves this policy. So we don't just decide today something different. We need to follow the policy that has been put before the board and approved. This is to guarantee the rights of everyone, but especially our focus is definitely on students because they are entitled to due process. And our standard of evidence, which you may go into a little more, is not like a court of law. It isn't beyond a reasonable doubt. It is preponderance of the evidence, which means that we are 50% plus a feather certain that that occurred. So we don't have to have that level of proof to make a decision. We focus our efforts from Student Affairs on trying to educate them. We're not trying to do the gotcha approach. We're trying to help them to understand so they get maybe a little more grace than if we were in a room passionately discussing that you would appreciate. But it is our intent to educate them and give them one chance to modify their behavior. Because from our experience, many students do not know. I realize it's hard to believe that they don't realize that that sort of behavior is not appropriate. But depending on their home of origin, that may have been communication. So we like to try to have a chat with them and help to educate them about those things. If you wanted to say anything else more about this, I think the next ones are yours.
Perfect. All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Kyra Milbourne-Holley. Welcome to a new semester. Just by a show of hands, have I had the pleasure of working with anyone in here? Show of hands? Great. Okay. Last semester was wonderful. Well, I welcome you all, your questions, concerns. I know sometimes there is a little bit of a gray area, so if you ever have any questions you're not sure, please email me or call me. No question is a bad question, okay? All right, so I want to talk about where you can get the Student Code of Conduct, okay? First off is Chapter 5 of the Student Handbook. If you ever need a physical copy, books. It's the handouts, are there more for this side, I'm being asked? Okay, perfectly, so they're gonna get to you. But so if you need one in hand, you can always go to Kent Hall, room 119, or you can reach out to Kyra Gardner, and she will be able to get you one, two, or say you want a box for your class. As long as we have the supply, you can get them in hand, okay? Another thing, we do have a PDF version. So you can find the student handbook, and you can also refer students to the college's website. You'll see on the bottom taskbar, it's in about the third column, you'll see where it says student handbook, okay? So they can always pull that up on their any mobile device, they can pull it up on a computer. You can also have it if you want to bookmark it, save it on your desktop. The next thing I want you to know is we do talk about academic integrity within the Planning for Academic Success course. That course is required for all new students or students that have less than 12 credits. So we do touch on academic integrity in there. Also, I attend orientations as I am invited, and I'll talk about the important things that a student needs to know regarding Chapter 5 of their student handbook, okay? I'm referencing Chapter 5 because Chapter 5 is me. That is the code of conduct, okay? So everything Chapter 5, you can refer your questions to me or the Office of the Vice President for Student Affairs. One thing I do want to touch on with the orientations, I also have a lovely student conduct orientation video. It's a little over 6 minutes. So if you ever just want to show that video the first day of class, reach out to me. I can send you a link. And it literally gets to the nitty-gritty of you need your student identification card. This is what we're expecting of a model student. And it even touches a little bit about the Violence Prevention Center. And as we talk about Title IX, you'll hear that more and more, and you'll see it throughout the semester.
If I might add, we have delivered student handbooks to department offices, at least at the dean's level. So they may have some close to home, but please reach out if you need some, certainly.
Yep. And if you do want the PDF version and you're not comfortable going to the website, or for some reason something happens, I can also email you that as well. Just also so you know, I do send out a welcome letter to all new students, and it comes in the form of their email. It also has a direct link to the new, most recent student handbook, okay? All right, so I wanted to talk about what should be reported. So student conduct violations, that is Chapter 5, it starts at page 113. I want you to know that we have them broken down by community standards, integrity, social justice, and if you ever are questioning, is this a violation of the Student Code of Conduct? All you have to do is go to Chapter 5, start at page 113. We have the descriptions fully in there, and you're able to say, if you find their actions or the behavior within Chapter 5, it is a violation of the Student Code of Conduct, okay? Another thing that gets reported to me, grievances, so unfair treatment. May not hear about this as often. Usually I'll hear about it from the student side, so then that comes in not as conduct but as a complaint. just so that you know, complaints. If a student submits a complaint, it goes to either, if it's student affairs focused, it goes to Kyra Gardner in the Office of the Vice President for Student Affairs. If it is on the TLSS
yes.
side, which used to be Academic Affairs, it goes to Andrea Wheeler and her office associate.
Tasha
Tasha. Yeah, what's her last name?
Jones.
Tasha Jones, and she also resides in Kent Hall, okay? So grievances, typically if they're from students, they come in the form of a complaint, and that's how they're dispersed for it to be looked into further. Suspicious or questionable behavior. This is that gray area that does not always fit into Chapter 5. It may be a pattern. You're seeing a change in a student's behavior. It may be to the point where it's questionable, but they haven't yet done anything. You're seeing a decline in their performance and it's out of character. That's when I'm concerned, but it hasn't reached the level of a violation. That would fall under BIT, and you'll hear the term BIT, and that is Behavior Intervention Team. That too gets reported to me. Myself, along with Michelle Richardson, who's the program director of the Wellness Center, we are the co-chairs for that. With BIT, we meet as needed based on students that are brought to our attention. So when I say questionable behavior, it could be also a student is just hanging around outside your office and you see them the same time every day. It may be a student where they're expressing some type of concerns in their writing, in their performance, in their day-to-day. They're asking questions that just seem a little off, and you just want to make sure that they're getting all the help that they need. You can also send that to me. So now I want to talk about how do you, yes ma'am.
Just a bit more clarification about BIT.
Yep.
Emotional issues as well, would we do that? Because sometimes you notice the decline in performance.
So I would say if it is an immediate concern, at that point I would say reach out to counseling services. If it's where someone needs to immediately come to the classroom, I would say immediately call campus safety. But if it's a concern that it needs to be researched and looked into, but it's not critical, you send it to myself. On the forming BIT is myself, Ms. Kathy Camp. It is typically someone from campus safety. It is typically a dean from student affairs, Thomas Mays from disability support services. So we have a round table of people that all have some type of knowledge base. It's always someone from counseling services, and together we'll go through what has been reported. Typically I'll pull up research, the students' classes they've taken, any character statements from other professors, and we put that all together and we try to form the best intervention and support system possible for that student. So it's not necessarily that we're going to disciplinary action, but we want to provide the support before it becomes a Chapter 5 violation. Because sometimes the student just needs us to make a path for them to use the services that we have. Okay, good
So that's the
question.
one thing I wanted to add. In the past few years, faculty have felt that if they reported a student, they would be in trouble. Not necessarily the case, because the same incident report form gets it to the people who can help them if it isn't a violation, but they need that help. Right. Thank you.
Yep.
Is information a part of the video, the 6-minute video?
Yes, I talk about the different services that we have, such as the Violence Prevention Center. I talk about counseling services. I thought about how we're taking an educational approach. So it's not always disciplinary action, sometimes it's sanctions. So recommending that they go to counseling services, say 5 or 6 times throughout the semester. I even had one student where she needed a mentor. It wasn't necessarily a specific service, but a mentor. And so I got her involved in WOW, which is Women of Wisdom. And so what we worked out is that she would attend 3 of their events each semester. And so it allowed her to have now a circle of people that she could come to that were females like herself, and she could come to them for different issues, concerns. They could direct her, and she had support. So yeah, it's not always disciplinary action is what I stress. So if ever in doubt, go ahead and send it, and I'll route it where it needs to go. Yes, ma'am.
So my question is related to teaching students with disabilities. This summer,
Mhm.
and what accommodations we're supposed to make, because we don't find out that we have them in our class until the class starts. And so I never had a deaf student with an interpreter before, so I wasn't sure, what I needed to do. So where do we get guidance in terms of, so that we don't make a mistake and that we do what we're supposed to do, because we don't find out.
Okay.
And you have the form, but it doesn't give you a lot of specific information, and sometimes the student can't tell you what you need to do to help.
Mhm.
I would say that, well, I think later today you have a more detailed presentation from the Disability Support Services Office, so you can get a lot of that information. But the intent is that sometimes students will come to your classroom and they're telling you that they have disability in some way, or they'll say they had an IEP in high school. The thing that students don't necessarily understand, that the IEP in high school does not carry over to college. And there's documentation that they have to submit from a doctor or a psychologist. Right.
Gone through that and have a form or something.
Correct. So what I was getting there, and then if they have done the process, because students will be in the class and they don't want to go to do the process of having the accommodation officially. And that's when I find we have the most issues, because students believe they need it, but they won't go do the piece that helps them get the accommodation. If they have, like you're speaking of, then we need to tighten up our process, because they've presented that information enough to have received accommodations. And if an interpreter is there, then we're aware, because we assign the interpreters. And we need to do better about communicating to faculty, because you should know as soon as we know, well, not immediate, but maybe the next day, that there's a student in your class that has cleared this process and is entitled to this accommodation. You should be able to reach back out to the Disability Support Services Office. Let's say you get Sally coming to your class with this disability and you don't feel like you know enough about what to do. They should be able to help you to know, okay, how could you modify the assignment? What might help to do this? They should be able to support you in some of that work as well.
And that's a great example, because that doesn't fall under me. But say, for example, that ended up in my space, then I would immediately send it to Thomas Mays, have you on the email as well, for him to step in, because that's his expertise.
Right.
Yep.
Great question.
You're welcome. Okay, so I want to talk about ways to report. So there's a few ways you can report. I hope I have made it easy. If you log into any computers on campus at any extension centers, you should see it's going to look like a little exclamation mark and a triangle, and it's going to say incident report form. I've made it easy for you to immediately double click on that. I will say it only works correctly in Chrome because of an update, but you can go directly there and you can submit the incident report form, okay? You can also locate the incident report icon on the portal page. It's right on the main taskbar that is across the top of the screen when you navigate to the portal. Also, campus police if necessary. If you ever have an incident and campus police is called and they respond, they will submit an incident report, but if you have any additional information that you want to add, you can submit an incident report later on that day, or you can simply send me an email and I'll add it to the incident report that was created by Campus Safety, okay? So if Campus Safety ever responds to a situation in your class or in the hallway, they will submit the incident report to me. But if you have a statement that you want to add, you can go ahead and submit one as well, and I'll merge them together, or you can send me an email. There also may be a time when I actually contact you asking for a statement, asking you what you witnessed.
Sorry, Kyra.
Mm-hmm.
Need a report number from the case, from the police?
No.
You'll be able to manage it.
Yeah, so as long as you put your name, if you know the parties involved, if you know time and location, I typically, it all comes full circle, and I'll say, oh, these all go together. Yeah.
What Kyra describes is the perfect world. And that is typically how that happens. But I just wanted you to know that depending on the day and what the college police has to do, they may not be able to enter it until the next day. We may not get the forms. So if it is of that level of concern for you, I don't think you should make an assumption, because you probably do have something to contribute to it. So you might as well submit it, because let's say they didn't submit it for 2 days for some reason because something happened and you already did. That gets us on it sooner. And eventually Kyra is going to reach out to you to understand your perspective. So by and large, they do submit it if you call college police. But just in case, you can get the ball rolling.
Yes, ma'am.
Kyra,
Hello.
say we have a incident, we report it to the police. What protection does the college provide while you're investigating to the faculty member and to the remaining students?
So at first, great question, and I've worked with you on this. So there are levels. So if you feel immediately threatened for your safety, that is a level that you need to communicate to campus safety. You can always request that they meet you outside your last class and that they walk you to your car. I've had some professors where they will just say, before class starts and after class, I would just like to have a police presence in the area. So we will do anything that we can to make you feel safe. If it ever is to the point where myself or campus safety feels that a student is either has the potential to harm themselves or someone else, we will issue an interim suspension form while we do our investigation. So interim suspension, it just means that that student is not allowed on campus until we go through due process and have the final decision rendered. Do know that even once a final decision is rendered, a student has 10 days to appeal that decision. At that point, we're not rehearing the case, but we are evaluating whether or not the disciplinary action and the decision was the correct thing to do for the violation, okay? But we have issued interim suspensions while we go through an investigation. We're more than willing to walk you to your car. We can come and have a presence in the area of the class. So just, we're open to coming up with some type of way to make both the faculty member and the students feel safe. So if you have suggestions as well, be vocal when you submit your incident report or when you call campus safety or my office.
Well, you know the incident I'm talking about. So we've just been informed that that particular person now has petitioned the college to come back to college. So what happens now when they've been thrown off campus, thrown out of the curriculum, but now they've waited a year, and now they've come back to the college?
So that's a great question.
What happens at this point when I know?
Yep, and I didn't know that. So first off, a student has to be reinstated back. So if a student is suspended, they have to fill out, once the term of their suspension is over, a green reinstatement form. Once they fill out a green reinstatement form, that is supposed to come to my office in Kent Hall 119. I will have a meeting with that former student. During that meeting, I am asking them questions. What have you been doing while you have not been a part of the campus community? What is your plan? We're talking about what we can put in place so that the violation does not happen again. And then once that student leaves, and I always have campus safety escort them back off campus because they're still technically suspended. At that point, I usually will meet with a few different people. I'll do some research to confirm or deny what were they doing while they were not a part of the campus community, and then we decide either to reinstate them or to decline, okay? So even though that particular student has petitioned, they're still currently suspended, okay? So if campus safety sees them on campus, they will immediately escort them off because they have access to the barred and suspended list. Not until they go through that reinstatement process with my office are they allowed to come back. So they can petition, but there are still holds on their account, which means that they can't register, they can't go through financial aid, they can't drop classes. Right now, their account is still on hold with a disciplinary hold from my office, okay? So they have to go through the reinstatement process, any student that is suspended before they can come back. Yes, ma'am.
I know we have no smoke drug-free campus, but if you have a student that comes in your classroom, you can actually smell the marijuana. And you know you may get suspended for smoking of marijuana that one time that you suspect. Do you call the police, or do you say, okay, I'll give him a chance, talk to him?
I was about to say I would first talk to them. I would see if it's a pattern where every day you're coming in and it's getting to the point where it's disruptive to my learning environment. Then at that
It's not disruptive to.
well, are other people able, the same way that you told me that you smelled it, there are probably other students around you that smell it as well, and that's starting a conversation. I would first off have a conversation with that student. And I would say that this is inappropriate. I just want you to know what I am able to smell and see, and that other people as well. I would ask that you're mindful of that before entering my classroom. If it does continue, I would submit an incident report form. Because what we can also do is we can do some training around substance use. We can speak to that student and let them know that that's not appropriate. And then depending on their response, it may move forward in a few different ways. But I would speak to that student first. If it continues to happen, I would submit an incident report form, and then I would say let my office have a conversation with that student, because it may be that I just need to have a heart-to-heart with them about how other people are viewing them, because when you witness something like that, people automatically get perceptions, and it can end up stunning their growth even as a college student. So I would say have a conversation.
That's what I don't want to do. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to escalate in such a way that he wouldn't be able to register the next.
I would simply have a conversation first. I always try to give students first. We go through due process because students do have rights. So sometimes it's as simple as having a conversation and a heart-to-heart with them and letting them know what will happen moving forward. Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Great question. Well, at that point, they typically have an identification card for the medicinal use. So we actually, even our campus safety now has been trained on requesting that card, what it looks like. So if he can produce that, then we would have to then
Honor that. Right. Exactly.
Things are coming about all the time. Okay, so definition of a disruptive student behavior. The term applies to behavior that are persistently or grossly interferes with the academic or administrative activities of the college. So this would be an example of where disruptive behavior, okay? It is making it so that the learning environment is compromised. It is making it so that someone can't focus. It is getting in the middle of lecture. It is making people uncomfortable. That is where the definition of a disruptive student comes into play, okay? There are extreme forms of disruption and there are mild forms of disruption. If it becomes a pattern and it's a mild disruption, that's when I would say submit an incident report form, because it may be as simple as the student has an undocumented disability and I need to contact Thomas Mays so that he can reach out to the student actively and help them go through the process so that I can let the faculty know what they need to do, okay?
In the next few screens, she's going to talk about the different mild and what we would suggest you to do. But the reason why I'm putting this definition up, if you could go back,
Yep.
is because we all have a different tolerance for disruption. Okay? And so we're just trying to be in front of you to say that we're trying to operate fairly from this description. And while you may be unhappy with my office because you can't deal with that level of disruption, we're kind of looking across the entire disruptive continuum, if you will, and trying to work with you to tell you to help with it, but to see reason, because we have faculty who every semester want us to get that student out of here, and we have to have some basis, and we have to have something that's fair across the classroom and across the individuals of which each of you are, and we all have our own triggers and our own things that are pet peeves, and we have to make it fair in that way. So that's why we're here trying to make sure this is the definition we're trying to operate from.
And an example of how I carry out this definition, it's not unheard of, and I have it happen a lot, where a faculty member will contact me and they'll say, I had students come in my class and they said they received a call from the Vice President for Student Affairs office. So there are times when a violation or an incident report will come across my desk, and I need to verify the validity, see, is this really a disruption, how many people are noticing it. Typically, I'll print out this class roster. I'll either call every other student or every 3 students, hoping that someone answers. And I'm simply I'm not putting a name out there, but what I'm asking them is, how has the class, I know you're registered for this class, how is it going? Are there any disruptions in class? And you'll have where some students say, oh, well, there's so-and-so student, but we just learned to not pay attention. And then you'll have other situations where all the students are like, no, everything's fine. And I'll go a little bit deeper and I'll say, well, how's the day-to-day? Are there any issues? Is the lecture going smoothly? Are there any interruptions? But typically, I am always calling either every other student or every third student, because I want to see, is this a disruption, or is it something where just the person beside them is just easily annoyed, or it's another relationship that's going on there, okay? So that's definitely, that may happen in your class, and if so, don't be alarmed. It's just simply me calling, trying to get some background.
We
Okay?
have 15 minutes, so we need to move a little faster,
Okay.
please.
So these are a few prevention strategies. You can include your expectations for your class in your syllabus. This is something that you typically review within the first week of class. So put those expectations in there, highlight the ones that are going to be looked upon, and ones that you have seen have been a pattern of possibly causing some type of concerns or issues. Another thing you can do is serve as a role model, so exhibit those behaviors yourself. Establish an environment where a student feels that they can express even opposing views respectfully, and set the tone for what will be tolerated and what will not be tolerated, and be consistent with that. Okay, so this just talks about mild disruptions and moderate disruptions. You can submit an incident report for those. Also, before you submit an incident report form, I do ask that you speak with the student so they're aware of the concern. And if at that point it is not corrected, go ahead and submit an incident report form. You can or cannot, you don't have to tell the student that I am, reporting this up, okay? All right, so this is an example of severe disruptions, in which I would say call campus safety, or you can push the third button on your phone in the classrooms, EMER. Push that button, it won't make a sound. However, it will go to dispatch and they will send an officer to your classroom. Also, I have heard that, yep. Oh, okay.
EMER.
So, yes, on the phone, it's the third button from the left.
Is it red?
It's not in red. No, it looks just like a regular button.
You know where it says redial, hold on those things? The third one over says emerge.
EMER. You push that, you'll think nothing happened, but it'll start recording and it'll go to dispatch and they will send an officer to your classroom. Also, these buttons, I heard during my Tuesday division meeting presentation, a professor had to use one of those buttons in the summer. He said it worked awesome. He had an officer in his class within 2 minutes. So there's a red emergency button also. I don't know if they've been installed in all of the buildings, but that is something new that is happening, okay? So for severe disruptions, when your safety is being compromised, you can do these forms and it'll immediately get someone to you, okay?
Our medical emergency, that was a medical emergency.
Okay. And the button worked well, I heard.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just briefly going to talk about one thing to know in my office. We do try to come up with sanctions and put things in place to support the student. However, if a disability is undocumented, at that point I will talk to Thomas Mays, but just know it's not retroactive. So if a student comes to my office and their disability is not documented, they can't then say the reason for my behavior was because of this and then try to go to Thomas. No, they should have went there first and had that process fulfilled. Do know also that when I'm going through the process, I'm being as neutral as possible with all parties, okay? So I'm going I'm confronting the action, not the necessary disability, okay? All right. Okay, academic integrity. So academic integrity, I'm just going to talk about the things you need to know briefly. So when things come to my office, they're either academic integrity or judicial, okay? Academic integrity is testing center infraction, cheating, plagiarism. Everything else is judicial, and that means threats, stalking, disruptive, disorderly conduct, all of that is judicial. What I do is when the first academic integrity case comes in, that is an academic integrity warning, because what I want to do is first warn the student of the behavior, teach them what is not acceptable, and then if you do it again, it is an academic integrity judicial. The next thing you need to know about judicial cases, once we go through the process, if a student is found responsible, that stays on their record for 7 years. That gets reported out on their background checks for employment, and it also goes in their educational, it also goes on their educational record. Yes, and
you're not wanting to do this because you can mess somebody's life up for 7 years.
well, that's why you've talked to them, and if the pattern continues, then at that point we have to move forward. Okay? But that's why we say talk to them first, and even with my office, I'm pretty mild, so I'll listen to the student. I have empathy, and then if I have talked to them, I've said, okay, you know, a lot was going on. Let's get you some support systems in place. And it's a consistent pattern where every professor or every semester I know your name, then at that point we have to take some action because we have to ensure the campus is safe as well.
To your concern, yes, they would have a conduct record. But when the person comes into my office, normally, most of the time, we say no report because there isn't any. When there is one, we don't, then I will be responding to tell them the nature of it. So if you're trying to work for the FBI and you cheated on your quiz in psychology, I think they weigh that a little differently than if you took your hands to another student. So we report a little more about that than just, yes, they have a record. So there are details to some degree provided because we get that privacy release from the student when they come.
And I tell that student within the warning conversation, I'm making it clear so that they know. I'm giving examples. If you apply for a state, county, or government position, when you authorize them to do a background investigation, they do come in my office inquiring about how you have been as a college student. So I make sure to make that plain, okay? So it's not a surprise. The next thing that you need to know, if it is not reported, it does not count for my office. So I'll have some professors where they'll say, this student has cheated 3 times and it's the first time I'm hearing about it. I have to count that as one time. That is their first academic integrity warning, okay? So if it is not reported to me, we will not pursue it. It does not go against the student. Only what is reported to me and the student has had a chance to respond will that work against them, okay? All right. Last thing you need to know about academic integrity. Please, 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 if you have any evidence to assist me in that conversation with the student, please submit that as well. You can upload it directly in the incident report form, or you can email it to me at a later time once you have gathered it. But please send me that evidence, okay? All right. Okay, Kathy, you want to hit on the F asterisk?
And back on the last page,
Okay.
you are entitled as faculty member to give a 0 to that assignment. What you are not entitled to do, unfortunately, is
expectation.
fail the class, right? Unless that assignment was so huge that it caused that to happen, okay? So for that assignment, you may assign a 0, have that conversation. Some faculty want to just fail them for the class. We're saying that they have this due process. This is not how we have to operate. Okay, the F asterisk process, this is how this gets onto the transcript, and that is forever. It will always be on their transcript, and at the bottom it says an academic integrity violation. That's why it's a dual process. So it isn't that we're trying to question faculty. We believe you when you say John cheated on that test. But the evidence that she's speaking of, the more we have that, because if he does it one time, you don't know that he did it in 2 other classes that semester. That's why all the reporting coming here, we know it's now the 3rd violation. So she's speaking about that first warning, then it becomes judicial. On that second judicial, that class would be where we would be putting that F asterisk, okay? And it has to be a dual process because Ms. Milbourne-Holley is going to tell me, oh, that's the 3rd one. We're going to gather all that evidence. We're going to decide, yes, this needs to go. And then Clay Rayleigh's office will confirm that, yes, this, and then because we put it on there forever, we want to make sure we've done our due diligence. Faculty members can request an F asterisk, and we will hear that. But if it's the first time and you want an F asterisk, I'm trying to explain today that that won't be happening on that first go-round. But all the evidence and everything that you provide builds that case, because more often than not, I will tell you that when we have that warning conversation, we don't have recidivism. They stop. Those that are going to are going to. And we need to educate them in a more permanent way, because if we don't and they go to university of whatever, they don't have that sort of mindset. Once and done. Okay? So does that cover all of that?
I believe it does.
So it can come, you can request it, but if it's
It
the
is a
first
dual
one, that
process.
won't happen. It'll be a dual process where we look at all the evidence and make a
And there are a
decision.
few things we will be requesting.
Yes, sir.
Kathy,
Mhm.
for you.
Yeah.
Student cheats on midterm in my class, midterm in Rick's class, midterm in Linda's class. Same basic time frame. Do you view that as 3 separate cheatings, or do you view it as one and then deal with the educational
No.
process?
If you submit it, and this one submits it, and that one submits it, we're at 3.
Right, 3.
Now, what my hope is that they didn't all come the same day, because I need to have been able to have a conversation first before I F asterisk. But if it came once and we do the conversations really quick, she turns those around very quickly. And the next week we get number 2, and the next week after that, that's number 3. That F asterisk would go on that class if we go through this process, look at all the evidence, right?
Yep. So the appealing the grade,
That's not ours, that's
yeah,
not us.
yeah, it's not us. I could speak to it because sometimes they assume, but Andrea Wheeler's office is the person for those. Yes.
That's still the same policy that you're probably aware of, 30 days. They have to submit that. There's a form. It goes through the TLSS side.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if you're going to take questions, then I think we're going to.
Okay. Sorry. Uh-oh. Okay.
Okay, and I've got to speak to you about Title IX, so let me do this quickly. You're aware of what Title IX is? It came about a long time ago about athletics and gender equity. It is now much broader than that. Okay, this is about anything related to gender identity, LGBTQ, male, female issues. This is beyond athletics, exceedingly. Next slide. You have all of this, right? So I hope you'll go back and look at this better. Title IX for us deals with sexual harassment and discrimination. Violence Against Women Act is a big player in this, and then the pregnant and parenting student is not, if we want to, it is legislated. There's the definition. What you have to be very careful of is you by nature, and I know you know this, but I got to say it, you as faculty have positional authority over that student. You cannot do anything that even gets close to that line where you're asking for something in exchange for that grade, ever. Otherwise, they'll report this, and here we go. Notice, I know that you guys want to help your students, and I appreciate that you have that confidential relationship with them. But I'm here to tell you, you are a responsible employee under Title IX at this institution, okay? So if someone comes and they tell you about this situation and you're trying to help them, I appreciate that, and I hope you will have that conversation. But what you do need to know is you need to advise the student that they have options. So if they want to speak to a confidential reporter, right, that's Counseling Services and the Violence Prevention Center if it relates to that sort of thing. They won't be telling us the details, they'll just report the numbers, because the Clery Act requires that in the annual security report we report the numbers. You have to submit an incident report or let our office know that this has been reported to you, because we cannot not do something, right? Because if you're trying to help, I appreciate that, but we have to know, because we have to rally the troops that need to intercede, okay? Next. Pregnant and parenting students. This is directly from the Dear Colleague letter. This is to not discriminate against a woman who, because her body carries a child, because there were 2 in that room to create the child, we're discriminating against the woman. She has to be allowed to return to the same academic or extracurricular status as before her medical leave began. So, I know it's easy to say, why did she register for a class? But you know, young women believe that they'll have a baby and 2 days later, off they go. And sometimes that happens. But you and I both know, I hope, that you don't know what will happen during that pregnancy. You can't foresee what trouble you'll have in that delivery. And we have a responsibility to work with that student and not penalize them. In general, your answer, you need to really think carefully when you tell that student to withdraw, just in general. Because if you tell them to withdraw and you don't know if they have a financial aid, you have just cost them financial aid potentially. If you tell them to withdraw and they're under a scholarship and you didn't ask that question, they've lost their scholarship. So use withdrawal, ask them to go speak to an advisor, ask them to see somebody else before we just say withdrawal is the best answer. For this group of students, go to the next slide, there is a process. There's a student routing form that I hope you know about. And you're not gonna, you don't approach the student, they have to self-report. I'm sure all the men in here know that you should never ask them if they're pregnant. That would be the same for this. But if the student reports that to you, then you're going to want to give them a student routing form and ask them to go to the, we call it the Wellness Center now, Bladen Hall 132. All you're going to put on the form is the name, your name, and your chair's name, please. And you're going to check Wellness Center and ask the student to go there within the week. When they go there, the Wellness Center will be able to talk to that student. They have a medical HIPAA protected system, so they can log that. Just like some students have 50 grandmothers that died, we want to make sure there's okay. So we track that way. But the real issue is that we want them to come there so if they're not getting prenatal care, that nurse can talk to them about those needs. They will report back to your chair that the student has come and make an STRK note, right? The chair will make an STRK note, not saying the student was pregnant. They have a code so we know that that's happened. That's how we log and track that and make sure. Now, it's not retroactive, as the next slide will say. So lots of students become having pregnant and parenting issues at finals. It isn't retroactive. So they needed to have disclosed in October that they are. And then as that moves, or they have horrible morning sickness, work with them. What you have to do in this case under Title IX is you have to sit with the student. You as the faculty can't say, this is what you're going to do. We have to work on a solution that will work, offer different options, and let's find something that works for the student. Perhaps it is an incomplete if that works, and they can finish that after. The parenting side of it is that this is not parenting if the child is 10 and has a doctor's appointment. This is that first year, let's say, after you gave birth and you're trying to breastfeed and you have to go pump. There are things that may be happening. We need to be empathetic for this group of people, okay, that are trying to continue their education. And as much as it's humanly possible, we need to not cancel their financial aid. We need to not cancel their scholarship. We need to work with them for academic success. Did I do that quickly? Yes.
Yes, we're good.
Yes, Regina. It is on the portal under faculty resources. Yes. Well, that's where Mara Doss puts that form, so there's a student routing form there.
Just this summer, I had a student who actually had a non-elective abortion. Well, she lost a child and came and took the exam the next, she had it the night and came take the
Oh, my
exam
word.
the day and failed the exam and then came to me after the fact and tell me, well, you know, I just lost my baby. Can I redo the exam?
See, the humanity in me would have said, yeah, you can.
Yeah, because that was so close.
Okay, so there's rules and regulations, and I know we're the student affairs, you know, bleeding hearts, but I do think that
didn't have time
you
to
have to
afford
use
it.
your professional judgment on that, and I would have tried to find a way to let her redo it. But you're not going to have to. We're not going to make you, but that's just the human part of it. Yes?
And this is during the semester, not after the semester, like a week after when the student comes to you and says, well, you know, I just, this.
Correct. Correct.
Kathy, if you could spend a little time with us, we'll have a little bit of a break.
Sure. And I just want you to know that we really want to be your partner. So please reach out to me in my office, and however we can, we will try to hear your concerns, help with the students, because we're all here for them. All right? Thank you so much.
First, thank you.
That's all right.
We're going to keep moving forward because we're a little bit behind, but I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to hear from the presenters that are here. So